The knock came at dusk, on the last dry evening before the snow. Ellen Rourke set down the lamp and opened the door to a man she had never seen. He stood with his hat in both hands and his coat buttoned wrong at the throat, and the cold came in around him like water finding a crack. "I came to beg for winter work." He said it plain, without shame and without hope, the way a man says a thing he has already said at 9 other doors. "I can mend fence, I can pull a calf, I can shoe a horse if your forge is not cracked. I do not drink. I will take the bunkhouse in my meals and no wages at all until the thaw, if that is what it takes." Behind her, on the 3rd stair, a boy of 7 sat with his knees drawn up under his chin and did not make a sound. Ellen looked at the man a long moment. She looked at the split along the side of his boot and at the frost already forming in the stubble on his jaw, and she thought about the note at the bank in Ashcroft, and about the letter folded in the kitchen drawer, and about the 62 heads standing out in the north pasture with a winter coming down out of Canada to meet them. Then she said the thing she had not said aloud to anyone. Not to the banker, not to the preacher, not even to herself. "I do not need a hand, I need a husband." The wind bent the lamp flame flat against the glass. The man did not step back. On the stairs, the boy leaned forward until the rail printed a pale line across his forehead and watched. His name was Samuel Ward. He gave it the way a man gives a thing he has not had much use for lately. Ellen put him at the kitchen table and set coffee in front of him and did not sit down herself. She stood with her back to the stove and her arms folded, because standing made it easier to say what had to be said, and because she had learned in 14 months of widowhood that a woman who sits down gets talked over. "My husband was Daniel Rourke," she told him. "He went through the ice at the water gap in June of last year, going after a cow that had more sense than he did. There is a note on this place at the bank. $1,100. It comes due the first week of April." Samuel turned the cup slowly and did not drink from it. "Mr. Pruitt at the bank will not carry a woman alone," she said. "He told me so kindly, with his hat in his hand, the same as if he were telling me the time of day. He said he would renew the note for a household." He was very careful with that word. "A household." "And your brother-in-law," Samuel said. Her chin came up. "So you heard the talk in town before you came out here. I heard a man in the feed store say the Rourke place would be sold by spring, and that a Clyde Rourke was waiting on it like a dog under a table. I did not know if it was true. I only knew that a place about to be sold still has to be fed through a winter, and that a man who will work for nothing is cheap enough for anybody." Ellen was quiet for a moment. "Clyde has offered me half of what this land is worth," she said. "He offers it again every month, and every month he says it's slower, because he believes the winter will do his arguing for him. He is not a violent man, he is only patient, the way water is patient with a stone." She took the letter out of the drawer and did not open it and put it back. "So here are my terms, Mr. Ward. We stand up in front of the preacher on Sunday. You take the room off the kitchen that was my father's. It is warm, and it is yours, and I will not come through that door, and you will not come through mine. It is a name on a paper and nothing else, and I will not have you believing otherwise. You work the winter. Come the thaw, if you want to go, you go, and I will pay you a fair wage for the months in cash if I have it, and in beef if I do not, and I will never speak of it again to a living soul." Samuel looked at his own hands for a while. They were cracked across the knuckles, and the cold had made them a bad color. "I am 41 years old," he said. "I have got a saddle, a rifle, a watch that belonged to my father, and a sorrel gelding that is worth more than the rest of it put together. I have got no land, and no people, and no story that would make anybody proud. You ought to know what you are buying." "I am not buying anything," Ellen said. "I am hiring a winter." Out in the front room, the boy had come down off the stairs without either of them hearing it and was standing in the doorway in his stocking feet. "That is Tobias," Ellen said. "He is 7. He has not spoken since we buried his father. Dr. Ames says there is nothing wrong in his throat, and the preacher says it is grief, and my brother-in-law says it is proof that this place is no fit home for a child. You will hear all 3 of those opinions before Christmas, so you may as well hear them from me first." Samuel looked at the boy. He did not crouch down, and he did not make his voice go soft and strange the way grown people do, and he did not ask him a single question. "Evening," he said. Then he turned back to his coffee, and the boy stood in the doorway a while longer, and nobody made him leave. They were married on Sunday morning with 2 witnesses and no flowers. And by Sunday afternoon, Samuel Ward was up on the roof of the hay shed with a hammer, because a man does not need a wedding day when there is weather coming. The snow came Tuesday. It came the way it comes on that country, all at once and sideways, and it did not stop for 2 days. Ellen learned the shape of him by what got done. She would come out at first light and find the path to the barn already cut, the ice already broken in the stock tank, the milk cow already turned out, the wood box already filled. He did not tell her about any of it. He came in at noon and washed at the basin and ate what was in front of him. And if she asked what he had been doing, he answered in 5 words, and then asked what she wanted done next. The boy started following him on the 3rd day. Tobias did it carefully, the way a cat comes into a room. He would carry a bucket he did not need to carry, or stand at the end of the barn alley with a piece of hay in his hands, and Samuel never once turned around and said, "Come here," or "Go on back to the house." He simply talked, not to the boy exactly. He talked to the horses about the weather, and to the mare about her feet, and to nobody at all about how a man ought to hang a gate so the gate does the work instead of the post. And Tobias moved a little closer each day, the way a wild thing does when nobody is looking straight at it. On the 6th night, Ellen carried the supper plates to the table and found there were already 3 of them set out. She stood still with the pot in her hands. The 3rd plate was at the head of the table. The chair at the head of the table had been empty for 14 months. She had eaten every meal of that winter with her back to it, and she had never once said a word about it, and she had never once moved it away either. Tobias was in his own chair with his hands in his lap, looking at nothing, the way a boy looks at nothing when he is watching everything. Samuel came in from the porch stamping snow and stopped when he saw where the plate was. Ellen did not trust her voice, so she only nodded once. He hung his coat on the peg by the door. There were 4 pegs there. He had been using the last one, the one nearest the cold, since the day he came. He crossed the kitchen and sat down at the head of the table, and he ate his supper, and he did not say one word about it, and neither did she. When the boy went up to bed, Ellen stood at the stove longer than the dishes needed. "He would have been 36 this month," she said finally. "Daniel, he talked all the time. He talked through supper and through church and through his own sleep. And now this house is so quiet I can hear the clock in the front room from up in my bed." Samuel was oiling a length of chain at the far end of the table. "Boy will talk when he has got something worth saying," he said. "That is more than most." The hard part came in January. The wind swung around and blew for 4 days out of the northeast, and the drifts on the north side went 8 feet deep in places, and the cattle drifted with it the way cattle do. And Ellen stood at the kitchen window on the 2nd night and did the arithmetic that every ranch woman does in the dark. 62 head. $1,100. 8 weeks of winter left. She was still standing there at 3 in the morning when she saw the lantern moving out past the corral. She put on the coat of her father and went out into it. The cold took the breath straight out of her chest. He was up on the hay shed with a shovel. The roof had begun to bow. She saw it when the lantern light swung. The center purlin had taken more snow than it was ever meant to take, and it had gone soft in the middle like a wet rope, and under it was every bale and every stack that stood between the herd and April. Samuel had already cut 2 poles out of the cottonwood by the creek and dragged them up. He had already been at it for hours. His scarf was frozen to his beard. "Go inside," he called down. "It will hold or it will not, and there is no sense in 2 of us being out here to find out." Ellen did not go inside. She held the lantern until her fingers stopped working, and then she held it in her other hand, and when he came down off the roof at 5:30, she had coffee hot and a blanket warming on the oven door. He did not thank her for it. He sat with the cup between both hands and his eyes shut, and after a while he said, "You are short about 4 tons of hay for the number of head you are running." "I know it," Ellen said. "I have been feeding 40 to the good cows and 30 to the dry ones, and pushing them onto the south slope where the wind scours it clean. There is old grass under there. It is poor feed, but it is feed. If we hold that line and the storms space themselves out, you will come to grass in April with 58 or 60 head instead of 40. Ellen sat down across from him. Daniel would have fed them all the same, she said. Every cow the same every day, because he could not stand to see one of them go hungry. And by March he would have had nothing left to give any of them. Samuel opened his eyes. "I did not say that to run him down," she said. "I said it because in 14 months you are the first person to walk onto this place and look at it and see what it actually is instead of what he meant it to be. Do you know what that is like? To have somebody see the thing you are actually standing in?" He looked at her then, properly, the way he had not let himself look at her before. "Yes," he said. "I know what that is like." Clyde Ror came out on the 22nd of February with Mr. Pruitt in his buggy, and the 2 of them came into the kitchen without waiting to be asked, because Clyde had been coming into that kitchen since before Ellen ever saw it. He was a soft-handed, pleasant-faced man with a good coat, and he had never in his life raised his voice, and Ellen had learned to be more afraid of that than of shouting. "Ellen," he said, taking off his gloves, "we ought to talk about this arrangement." Samuel was at the far end of the room with a broken hamstrap and an awl. He did not get up. "There is nothing to talk about," Ellen said. "The note is renewed. Mr. Pruitt renewed it in December, in writing." Pruitt studied the floor. "Renewed to a household," Clyde said, and smiled a little. "That is what troubles me. I have been asking around about your household. This man came off the road in October with nothing but a horse. Nobody in Ashcroft knows a soul who has ever worked alongside him. Nobody knows where he was in 87 or in 85. And a judge, Ellen, a judge would want to ask why a woman who would not take a fair offer from her own family took a stranger to the preacher inside of 5 days instead." He let that sit. Then he turned to Samuel, and he said it kindly, which was the worst of it. "Mr. Ward, I am going to speak to you as one working man to another. There is $100 in my coat. It is yours this afternoon. You are not in any trouble, and I am not accusing you of anything, and I will say so to anybody who asks. But you know as well as I do what this looks like, and you know she is the one who will wear it, not you. You will ride out of it. She has to live here." The room was very quiet. Ellen could hear the clock in the front room. Samuel set down the awl. "You are right about one thing," he said. "She has to live here." And then he said nothing else at all, and Clyde put his gloves back on and said he would come again in a fortnight, and the buggy went down the lane with the snow squeaking under it. That night Samuel did not come in for supper until it was nearly cold. Ellen found him in the barn with the saddle blanket over his arm and the sorrel gelding pulled out into the alley. "You are going," she said. He did not deny it. "Everything he said in that kitchen is true, and it is going to be true in April, and it is going to be true in 10 years, he said. "You will be the woman who married a man off the road. Every time that boy walks into the schoolhouse, somebody will have said something at their supper table the night before. I can be gone by morning, and you can tell them I turned out to be exactly what they said I was. It will go easier on you if the story is that you were fooled. Folks will forgive a woman for being fooled." Ellen stood in the cold and could not think of one word to say. Neither of them heard the boy come in. Tobias had his coat on over his nightshirt and his boots on the wrong feet, and he crossed the barn alley in 8 quick steps and took hold of the sleeve of Samuel Ward with both hands. And he said out loud, in a small rusted voice that neither of them had heard since the June before last, "Do not go." Samuel went absolutely still. Ellen put her hand over her mouth. "He is not a stranger," the boy said, and every word came out harder than the last, the way water comes when the ice first breaks. "He is not. He fixed the roof. He carried me on the horse. He is mine." He turned and looked at his mother, and his chin was shaking. "He is my pa now. Tell him. Tell him he is." Ellen crossed that barn floor and went down on her knees in the dirt and the chaff and pulled her son against her, and she was crying in a way she had not allowed herself since the day of the funeral, and over the top of that small head she looked up at the man standing there with the blanket still over his arm. Samuel Ward put the blanket down on the rail. He got down on one knee, level with the boy, and he put his hand on the shoulder of him and held it there. "All right," he said. That was all. All right. He put the sorrel back in the stall and shut the gate, and then he stood there, with his forehead against the top rail for a long time, with his back to both of them, so that neither of them would see his face. He rode into Ashcroft on the Thursday before it was light, and he did not tell her he was going. Ellen spent the whole of that day pretending she was not watching the lane. Tobias talked. That was the strangest part of the week. He talked all morning, in bursts, about the mare and the calves and a hawk he had seen, as if a door had been left open and the whole house was airing out. Samuel came back at dusk on the wagon seat of a hired rig, leading nothing behind him. The stall was empty when Ellen went out. She stood looking at it, at the clean straw and the halter hanging on the nail with nothing under it, and she understood before he ever said a word. He had sold the sorrel gelding, he had sold the watch of his father and the good rifle with it. She found him in the kitchen with his hat on the table. $410, he said. "It is with Pruitt against the note. He wrote me a paper for it. The rest we will make in the fall when the calves go, and if the fall is bad we will make it the fall after, and Clyde Ror can wait under the table as long as he likes." "You sold your horse," Ellen said. "Yes, that was how you leave." "I know it," he said, and then he took out a second paper, folded small, and put it on the table beside his hat, and he pushed it across with 2 fingers and did not look at her while she read it. It was drawn up by the clerk of the court. It set out that the deed to the Rourke place, all 480 acres of it with the water and the improvements, stood in the name of Ellen Rourke, and would pass at her death entire to Tobias Daniel Rourke, and that Samuel Ward, husband, claimed no right, title, share, or interest in any part of it, then or ever, and had signed to that effect in front of 2 witnesses. Ellen read it twice. Her hands were not steady. "You gave away everything you got by marrying me," she said. "In front of the whole town. Pruitt will have told 9 people before supper." "That is why I did it in front of him," Samuel said. He picked up his hat and turned it around once. "Clyde was right about one thing. Folks will always ask what I came here for. Now the answer is written down at the courthouse in Ashcroft, where anybody can go and read it, and when that boy is grown and somebody says something to him about his mother in a bar, he will have some place to send them." He went to the door and stopped there with his hand on the frame. "I do not have anything to offer you, Ellen. I have said so from the first night. But I am not going anywhere, and you can take that as it stands, because it is the only thing I have got that is worth a damn." Ellen Rourke got up from the table. She crossed the kitchen and she took the hat out of his hands and hung it on the peg by the door. Not the fourth peg, the cold one nearest the draft, where it had hung since October. She hung it on the second one, next to her own coat, where it had room. Then she said, "Supper is in 20 minutes. Wash first." And that was the whole of it, and both of them knew exactly what had been said. The grass came the first week of April, the way it does in that country, all at once and green as a lie, up through snow that was still lying in the shade of the fence line. They came to it with 59 head. Ellen counted them herself from the gate on the south slope, with the wind pulling her hair loose, and then she counted them again to be sure, and then she stood there a while longer, for no reason at all. Clyde Rourke stopped coming. He sent a letter in March that Ellen read once and put in the stove. Mr. Pruitt tipped his hat to her in the street in a way he had not done in 2 years, and she found she did not much care either way. Tobias talked now the way he had talked before, which was too much and about everything, and mostly at the wrong time. He talked all the way through church. He talked to the calves. He told the schoolmaster that his pa said a gate ought to be hung, so the gate does the work instead of the post, and the schoolmaster wrote a note home about it, and Ellen laughed until she had to sit down on the porch step. There was a bay mare in the sorrel stall by then, bought cheap and green-broke and hard-mouthed, and Samuel had her half fixed by May. He came up the lane on her in the long light of an evening with the boy riding double behind him, arms locked around his middle, hat gone somewhere back along the creek, saying something at a great rate that nobody could hear yet. Ellen stood in the doorway and watched them come. Behind her on the kitchen table there were 3 cups set out, because there had been 3 cups on that table every day since February, and the boy set them out himself before he was asked. By the door, on the second peg, hung a canvas coat mended at the elbow, with thread of the wrong color, because that was the only spool she had in the house, and neither of them had ever once mentioned it.